Hey friends, welcome back. Today we are going to walk through how to do a mix on a demo, or rather I should say how I do a mix on a demo. Operative word here is demo. So when I mix a demo, my idea is that I want to take my rough idea, also emphasis on rough. It's not perfect, it's a sketch. I'm not sending this to Metal Blade Records. I'm sending this to my other bandmate for him to work off of. Radio ready. I'm not sending it to a label. It's not even being released. It just is putting together an idea, gluing together the components to send to somebody else, which is what I believe a demo should be. Demo being short for demonstration. So I will walk you through what I do. I do it pretty much the same between all of the bands. I have a workflow kind of down, and for the most part, it's consistent across all of my projects. Even the way that I mix most stuff is pretty consistent, and I'll walk you through how I edit, what plugins I use, why I use them, stuff like that. So you'll see that up through the end of the first chorus where I told you that I was going to be cutting you guys off because this will be a finished track that goes on the By Fire and Sword record, so I can't give you everything. But I'll take you up through the first chorus. So if you've paid attention to the other videos, you know that I use Logic Pro. I'm a Mac guy. I'm not sorry about it. I use Logic. I did dabble with Luna a little bit when it came out because I do use Universal Audio stuff. And the workflow in there was so different from the Logic workflow that I'd been using for like 6 or 7 years at that point that I struggled to adapt to Luna. I thought it sounded really good, and once I got used to it, it worked good, but Logic is just warm blanket fuzzies for me, so I stick with Logic. So the first thing is let's go through the way it is rough here up through the first chorus where I'm going to stop you. I did finish the song, and I was right. It's like 5 minutes or hair. It's not as long as it could have been. I had more ideas, but I curtailed. So let's go up through that first chorus. You thought I was going to slip up, but I ain't playing. You don't get to hear the rest of that. So we're going to be stopping at bar 67 for the future. Couple things to point out here. One, that actually wasn't terrible. Just kind of the loose way that I have the volumes set over here on the left to begin with, that wasn't terrible. There are some things I want to adjust, and we'll go through that and why I make those adjustments. Another thing is that, like, if you look, none of the clips are crossfaded. So for instance, if I if I just play them one over the other, you'll hear like a slight click. I was very like, and that's the hard stop on the previous track, and then the start, or not track, clip of the start of the next clip. And so there isn't a fade, so it's starting and then stopping, which produces that little click. It's you can't really hear it when the full thing is going, but it's there and it's bad. You don't want it. So what we'll have to do is, in the edit phase of all this, we'll go through, we'll cut out anywhere that there's silence, put fades at the beginning and ends of things. I'll crossfade tracks if they butt up against each other, and just kind of clean it up. I'm not going to do any level adjustment or any automation yet. I'm just going to go through and cut it up where I need to, fade it where it's necessary, just so that there's no weird starts and stops with the clips starting and stopping. So I might speed some of this up because it's not very interesting, but let's do a little bit at first. So typically what I do is I will solo this track. Yes, this one has a click. So if you bring up the mixing, not the mixing one, I forget what this window is actually called. I just know that it's the E button, but I think it's the editor. I don't quite remember. But I can click over to this intersection, which is right here, because this is zoomed in way big. So that's right here. And what I do is I go down and I grab the fade tool. And then if you select the tracks, I already have them selected because I'm stupid. And then you just do a little fade. That looks big, but this right here is one beat. From 18 to 19 here is one bar. So it's a very small amount of time. So if we go back and we listen to it with that fade, smooth. There's no click in there. And that's what you want. So then typically, because I know that this guitar below it, the other rhythm guitar, is going to ring out, then I will come through, and you got to be careful if you have all of your tracks highlighted here, because if I fade on this one and they're all selected, it'll apply fades across the whole track, and that's not necessarily what I want. So let's go to the playhead. So these are highlighted. Then I'm going to do another little fade here. I want just the smallest fade. And then so let's check this lead guitar. So we can look at this waveform where, okay, it's ringing out, it's getting quiet. So I don't want this like sound. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do, but I do, brain fart, I do kind of like it fading out, but I don't want that. So I'm going to cut that, come up over, sorry, that's on this track. Oh no, it is on this track. So I'm going to drag the playhead where I want it to cut, up here, Command T, delete. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade the end of this, and then I'm going to come over to this track and I'm going to fade it in. So this one will dip, but there won't be any clicks. Wrong button. So it just starts and stops cleanly. There's no click of the sudden ramp of volume. So let's look at this other lead guitar. So this one I'll crossfade because it rang out the whole time. On another song, I might trim it to match this lead guitar above it, just for symmetry. But I don't know that I need to because demo. On the album, I might go through and do that. So we'll see. Let's listen to it. You couldn't really tell. That's fine to just leave it like that. And then let's look at the bass down here. So The bass is one that doesn't have a lot of sustain, so you can see that it dips, it fades out pretty heavily. So let's see where it actually is out, if it ever completely drops. So I'm going to just crossfade that because there's no weird noise in there, and it is very slightly, like very quietly sustaining. So we're just going to crossfade it. So let's check this next section. I mean, I know that these are good because I went through and stopped and started all these recordings and checked them when I was recording. So I'll just come up here, select those two, come over to the playhead, and then do a slight crossfade, and it'll apply it to both tracks. Okay, so here's a good example. So if you remember how I had the bass track, the whole track was highlighted when I went through and did my crossfades, it applied a crossfade at everywhere that there was a clip cut. So I'll have to go through and adjust those and make sure those are right because I was not paying attention. So something to pay attention to. So let's go to the playhead here. So this one is fine. I'm going to crossfade this clip out, but I want to see where I want to start on this one because this is just junky noise. This is me actually starting playing. So probably about here is where I would cut that. So I'm going to select just this track, cut it, come over here, delete that. And so then on this one, I'll come over here, come over here, and we'll do a slight fade. And then I'll select this one, and I will put my playhead or my mouse about where that starts so that it's at full volume where it fully starts. So let's listen to that. Get the idea. So let's check this track below it. Same thing. So I'm going to come over here because you don't need that much time to fade up. So right about here is good. We'll cut that. Come over here. I will fade this out ever so slightly. Come over here. Boom. So let's check that one. Yep. So then the bass looks like it's doing something kind of weird. So let's check it. I'm going to leave it. There's no weird noise. So let's check. Oh no, I mean, I know this one's good. So let's come over here and crossfade this. And then one thing I can do is I can select all three of these and apply a crossfade because they're full volume. I'm clearly playing and I liked it because I kept it. So it's safe to just fade it. So this one we know we like. Come over here. Crossfade this. Let's check these lead tracks. So that's kind of cool. So probably right around where it becomes just like ring out noise, I'm going to fade it right there. I don't want to just cut it because that'll sound a bit harsh, but right around where it becomes just kind of fade out noise or like guitar noise, whatever. Okay, so there we go. Let's check the bass here. Yeah, that was fine. Okay, so let's check these leads because this is the first time something's kind of coming in like this, except for at the beginning. So let's just check the top one. So even there, that's me putting my finger on the fret, I think, which caused that slight ring out. So, I'm going to clip it here. And then that's where the playing is supposed to start, so it'll fade up into that. Let's check this one. Yeah, I'm going to clip that in that same place because it looks like I started closer on the beat on that one. And we'll come back, fade that. So let's check those. Yep, that's cool. And then let's check this fade out. Yeah, I'm just going to fade that out because I like that kind of ring out noise. I think it's authentic. Why do I keep ending up all the way over there? Okay, so then do it right there. Oh, you were not supposed to hear that. So I'm going to grab that one and make it a little sharper. I tend to do pretty harsh slide downs when I'm done playing. That's that wow. So not my favorite habit, but it is what it is. And then let's check, or we don't need to check, but let's fade these ones. Okay, and so that's everything up through the... Oh, so when I did that earlier, it goofed up these fades. So let's check that. Cool. Why didn't it do it up here? So let's just make sure those all look right. So it goofed up this one because I wasn't paying attention to the track being fully selected like a dumbass. Okay. That all looks right. You don't need to do that on the MIDI tracks. Like if I just play the drums, it doesn't do that click start stop thing. So there's no need to do that on the drums. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and edit and fade and whatever the rest of the song past this chorus, because obviously what I'm mixing now will apply to the rest of the song. So I'm going to skip ahead to being done with that. Okay, so I wanted to make another disclaimer. This is just how I do it. I'm not Joey Sturgis or Steve Albini or any of those guys. I'm just one guy mixing his own stuff for utilitarian purposes and for fun. So I'm not saying this is the definitive way to do it. I don't think that there's a right way. I think that mixing is as much an art as it is a science. And I think if it sounds good, it is good. So if you disagree with something that I'm doing, write it in your journal. If you have constructive criticism or like a keyboard shortcut I don't know, that's different. But if you're going to be like, it doesn't sound very good, tell it to your mama. So now let's pull up the mixing board. So as you can see here, I have 6 tracks. I have a rhythm guitar that's panned all the way to the left, a rhythm guitar that's panned all the way to the right, 2 lead guitars that are panned just slightly left or right, depending on the channel. A bass that's obviously panned center because bass should be panned center. And then the drums. I could, if I wanted to, inside of Kontakt, break these out into 12 individual drums. I'm not going to do that. It's a demo. If I was using the Get Good drums for the actual studio files, then I would do that and I would pull it out and I would mix the ride separately from the hi-hat and it would sound really pristine and kind of unrealistic. But I'm not going to do that because it's just a demo. And the summed audio on the Get Good drums sounds great. So there's no reason to do that. It's going to be just fine for our purposes. So One thing I like to do to start is I want to see where all the audio levels are sitting. I like to keep them somewhere between -9, -12. I've seen people say that really they should be sitting around -16. Seems extreme to me, but like I said, everybody does it a little differently. Another thing I like to do to start is I immediately throw on a limiter. I bring it down to -5 out and no gain. I want to keep cracks, pops, any accidents that I do from deafening me if I do something dumb. There are a couple of different schools of thought on how you should mix. I have a specific set of plugins that I like, and I know about where I want them to be set. So I tend to kind of set those plugins on my mastering chain or my output and then mix into them. Like I know the end goal of how those plugins should sound collectively when they're together, and then I'll kind of tweak the individual tracks to fit into that. I forget who said that. It was like mixing into the plugin or mixing into your mastering. I forget. Whatever. I forget who said that. I'll have to dig it up. That didn't make a lot of sense, but it made sense up here. It'll make sense when you see me do it. So first, let's go through and set our levels. We have every channel right off the bat. So let's see where we're sitting. With the exception of the drums, and I should have clarified, the studio drums usually are a little higher. I make sure they don't peak, but they're usually ramped. So even with a 4.5 boost right now, it's louder than it should be because I'm going to turn it down and then adjust it in the plugin. But for the example, so right now it looks like the two rhythm guitars are sitting -9.7. The leads are sitting -11, -12. Because those are not panned, they are louder. And so I keep them lower because they're more present since they sit fairly center in the mix. So I keep the lead guitars a little quieter because you don't need as much volume to be as effective, and they'll become more pronounced when I throw on the EQ and I goof them up. That's great. Let's get into some actual playing. The nice thing about that being a plugin is the drums being a plugin is that they typically won't peak or clip. So even though I'm riding over, it's not going to clip. The guitars and the bass and stuff like that will absolutely clip. But right now I'm actually pretty happy with those levels until I throw the plugins on the chains. So, or not the chains, but until I throw the individual plugins on the tracks. But for right now, I'm pretty all right with that. So let's grab Contact. And then I'm going to come in here. And so I've been using the raw kit, which sounds great, but I'm going to bump it up to the high CPU one, which gives it just that little extra zhuzh. It's got some extra processing that's happening within Contact that makes it sound really good. And I'm going to turn up the master volume on it. And then let's come through here. The kick is good. The snare volumes are good. I'll tweak it as we're going. I do want to turn on some reverb. And then the toms, the volume is good. And here you can control the panning. That's good. I am going to throw some reverb on the toms. I might come back and play with that a bit. And then the cymbals are good. I think in the song I'm just using hats and not rides, but crashes. So the overheads look good. And then if I come into settings, I can control the actual mix of the cymbals within the overheads and the room microphones. I tend to pull my hats down out of my overheads just a bit, just because hats are loud. So I pull them down just a hair, but for the most part, I tend to boost the crashes just a little. Again, might adjust as we're going. It kind of depends. But I typically don't goof with the room mics. I leave them alone. So let's go back here and bring this down and give that a play and see if we're happy with that. So that was a bit quiet, so I'll adjust that as we're going. Okay, I'm pretty good with that. It's still getting a little loud, but like I said, it's not going to clip. That's going to sound fine. I don't typically apply many plugins to the drums because so much is happening within the contact plugin that I'm, for the most part, just going to leave it. I might adjust some toms up or down as we're going, which reminds me I should come back and check these toms. I was fine with that. So let's check that gallop again. Yeah, that all sounds fine. Let's try a different beat. Yeah, that sounds pretty good, and I haven't done that much already. So the first thing, get out of here. So I'm going to come through on the output chain or my mastering chain, and I'm going to put on dynamics. For the most part, I use I use some stock Logic plugins because, again, it's a demo. So dynamics. Where the hell? All this UAD stuff being in here is new. But I'm looking for the multipressor. If you don't know, a multipressor is a multi-channel compressor. Multipressor. And so what this is going to do is it's going to apply some compression over different bands on the output of the entire track. And it's also going to tell me if I'm clipping on the output of this multipressor. So that's just a good way to make sure that I'm within acceptable levels. So let's start at the beginning. See how this thing went red right here above the 0? That means if you exceed 0, it's too loud. One thing I try to do is that as I go sequentially through my chain, I try to get as much volume as I can out of each stage before trying to adjust it in the next plugin. So like, I want the volume coming out of the multipressor to be acceptable before it goes into another plugin, and then have me try to correct it in that next plugin. Gain staging gets tricky, so I try to just like as much volume as I can get each way. That way I'm not having to compensate later, personally. Let's get into a louder part. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I tend to kind of like just the stock settings on this multipressor. It's pumping on this low end pretty hard, but it sounds all right. Like, so let's listen to it with it on and with it off so you can kind of see the difference. So when it's off, it's obviously much louder because it's not being compressed. When it's on, it's a little tamer, a little more even compression. So then from here, I go through and I like to add, where is it? The exciter, a harmonic exciter. And so this just kind of makes certain frequencies in the mix pop a little bit. Got to be careful doing this. You don't want it to, like, it can be dangerous. You can use this for evil for sure. So again, I'm using the stock Logic exciter. I've never looked for another one. I'm sure they're out there. I don't really care. So I like the second color, and usually somewhere around here and then around 6300 is what I like. So let me come over here. So I'll do that again. So here's it off. And then halfway through, I'll kick it on. And you can just kind of hear it just as a little brighter. It's got a little more energy to it. So. It's obviously accentuating higher frequencies, which we like. So then the next thing I do is my imaging. So I bring out the stereo spread. Again, stock Logic plugin. And so this is setting how severely things are panned in Logic and at what frequency range is being affected. So the first thing I do is I bring this lower interval down to about 4. And then I bring this lower frequency to 3600, which is basically saying anything below 3600 doesn't get panned. Then I bring this one down to 16.3, and then this upper interval down to 74. This is something I stumbled on, and I don't remember how. I think I saw it on a Reddit page where some guy was like, this is the magic sauce. I've never really played with it. This is kind of just what I do on everything, and I like how it sounds. So I haven't really goofed with it. I could lower this lower frequency so that it's, panning more stuff, but I kind of don't really like the way that sounds. I just don't really goof with it. So this is what I do. Oh boy. So I'll show you what this sounds like on and off. So here's with it off. When it's on, you can really feel it just kind of widen out the mix, obviously, because it's panning things. And it sounds better. There's air in there. It just has like a good vibe to it. So I do it, and I like it. After the stereo spread, we're going to get into my waves plugins. I only use a couple, but I like them. So the first thing I'm going to do is this Chris Lord Algae. Is it Algae? Chris Lord Alge? CLA mixdown. I'm going to do it in stereo. And what this is, I don't know exactly what it's designed to do, but you can emphasize your bass, your treble, you can add drive to it. There's obviously an input and an output level, And then there's this, the thing that I really like is this glue here. And that just kind of like, I think it's more compression, but it just kind of like makes everything, like the bass sit nicer with the guitars. It just sounds a little thicker, and I really like that. So I usually turn up the treble just a bit, the bass just a bit, the glue quite a bit, and then I don't usually add drive. But let's see where we're at here. Cool. I'm going to check that input volume again because this activated like it was too loud. I haven't adjusted the input or the output volume, but let's make sure we're good. Okay, so it says right here it's triggering as being too loud. Some of that could just be added from the exciter and the stereo spread. So I can pull up this multipressor and let's see if the multipressor is activating at that same spot. It is. So I'm going to bring down the multipressor just a hair. So I did not reactivate or clear that. So you'll see it did not turn on again here, and we're not clipping on the output at all. So I bring it down out of the multipressor rather than just go through and adjust all of my tracks here in my, like the actual individual tracks, because I like the current ratio, the way that sounds. I just want it to be a little quieter. I could come over here and just turn all of these down a bit, but I don't want to. So I added quite a bit. I added 4. I moved this from 0 to 4.1. No drive, obviously. I adjusted the treble up 1 and the bass up 1. I did not move the input volume. So, and our volume on the output here is pretty good. We don't seem to be anywhere near clipping. So I'm not going to adjust the output volume. But let me show you what this is doing with it on and off. So we'll start with it off. It just is a little tighter, more punchy, a little bit more focused. We love. So the next one that I'm going to do is one of my favorite plugins, and it's go away. It's another Waves plugin, and it's called the Infected Mushroom Pusher. And I stumbled across this on like a Waves Black Friday sale or something like that. And I was, for one, it looks trippy, and I like that. And it turns out Infected Mushroom is like a EDM hip hop producer duo. And this plugin is like compression plus like volume plus like an exciter. Basically, the only thing I use in here is this magic knob with the mushroom on it, because obviously it does have meters in and out to tell you can affect the stereo image. I don't do really hardly any of that in here. The only thing that I ever adjust in here is this magic setting and maybe a touch of low end, but really I don't. It's mostly just this magic setting. So let's play with that. I usually like it here somewhere around like 7 o'clock, which is pretty dramatic. It's like 21, like a 21.6 adjustment, but let's listen to it with it off. It's one of those things I have a hard time articulating. I don't exactly know what it's doing, but I know that I like how it sounds. I think it is just like a little more excitement, kind of some like mid-range push a little bit. Not, like I said, not entirely sure, but I like how it sounds. If I wanted to, I could add some more low. I could use the push as like an overdrive, but I'm only going to use the magic knob here. So then the next plugin that I'm going to use, this might be controversial. I don't think it is, because I'm going to explain why. But the next one is a ToonTrack plugin that I got turned on to by my buddy Tucker from his band Throne of Iron. You should go check out Throne of Iron. Good buddies, awesome dungeon crawling D&D heavy metal. So this is EZmix, which is designed to make mixing easier, which has my name all over it. I really don't use very much out of here. I'll run through like some plugins that I have on some of the instruments that I use from EZmix, but it's not very much. Really, I kind of like these mastering plugins. They just have like interesting tonal qualities to them, and we'll try a couple different ones so you can see them. But they aren't like full on like this is a master and then you're done. They just have like they give some shape and color to stuff, and sometimes I use different ones. Like this metal master one I almost never use because it tends to really drive stuff and I don't like how that sounds. I do like the parallel overdrive. Sometimes I use the soft pop one, which surprises even me. But a lot of times I use this vintage one. So let's check those out. Because we've been living over this gallop riff, let's use the verse for this. So let's go with the vintage master to start. So you can see down here, it tells you what it does. Is it has a high and low filter and then a tape drive. And then that has input and output control, so I can control how much volume is coming in versus how much it's sending out. Let's play with that. So that sounds pretty good. Oh, let's back up. I should put that down here. So let's listen to it without, and then I'll turn it on. So one thing about the vintage one is it seems to add quite a lot of mids. So I will have to come back later and scoop a little bit of that out if I go with this one, but that's kind of what it does. Is it adds a tape drive which pushes it. It's got this high and low filter. I typically don't tweak these settings too much. Sometimes the input and output volume. Let's see where we're sitting on the volumes. We're not clipping on the in or the out. So let's try the soft pop master. So the soft pop has this loudness one, and there's a couple in here that have this loudness feature, and that tends to bring in some, I don't know if it's actual clipping, but like I hear a noise. So probably not going to use this one, but let's see the difference. So it adds a lot of volume because it's pushing real hard. I don't love that one. So I'll show you what I mean with this metal multi-band master one, or the metal master bus. So this one is just push, which tends to just kind of make it sound real like mid 2000s, early 2010s, like radio rock. You'll see what I mean. So let's turn it on. Well, I'm going to keep it off and then I'll turn it on. Just kind of is gritty. I don't know. I don't like it. really. The other ones, I pretty much never use any of these, but let's try this multi-band master one. Start with it off. So, see if I can find it. You can hear in that one that it's also, for one, it's got this loudness one on there, and it just is like so much. It's, I don't know, there's noise. It's not it doesn't sound like it's clipping, but it's noise. And I don't love that. So if I bring this down, for a second I thought I went too far. I was like, you're not supposed to hear that. So let's compare that to the vintage one that I normally like. So here's the multiband. I think for this one, I do like the multiband, but I have to keep this loudness knob down. Otherwise, it's too much noise. Let's check that limiter with all of this on just to be safe. So even with all that on, we're hitting just about 0, but not above. So it all sounds fine to me in the room. Yeah, I like how that sounds. So that's kind of like the output mastering chain. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the tracks to fit into that so that they sound good in that. Rather than applying the mastering to make the mix on the tracks sound good, I'm going to mix the tracks into those plugins, because that's pretty close to how I normally have it. So let's check from the beginning to make sure that we like the volumes of things here so far. Mostly I'm worried about the lead guitars, since the octaves I'm playing in can change, and thus the perceived volume of them. So I really like the volume of that there. So let's check into this gallop bit. So I think that lead part specifically is too loud. And so there's two ways I can adjust this. So I could come up here and I could adjust the actual gain of the track, like make that clip quieter. The other way is through automation. So I can come up here, activate the automation page, and then if I come over here, zoom in a bit. So right now, lead 1 is set at 1.8 decibels. And then lead 2 is set at 0. I basically didn't adjust it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and create 2 of these little nodes. And then at the end of this section, which is very long because I zoomed in, I'm going to create 2 more. That way, whatever I adjust over this track only affects the inner 2 nodes, and the volume will go back to what it is for the rest of the track once it hits this node. Brain fart. So on the second track, I'm also going to put in some automation here at the same places roughly. And then zoom back over here. This one's tougher because I don't have an empty spot here. So I'm going to get as close to the end and start of this track as I can. So right here, and we'll start right at that track. So now what I can do is I can select this inner piece. Oh, not what I wanted. So I can bring this. So this is 1.8 and 0, 0. I want to maintain that relationship. So I'm going to bring this down. Let's try 1 decibel. So I'm going to bring this down to -1. 1.1. It's hard to be exact on this sometimes. I've never mastered it, but so let's zoom back out, or scroll, zoom out, and let's listen to that volume difference. So you'll see that this is going to stay at 1.8, and then it will dip down to 0.8 when the track hits that point. Still too loud for my taste, so I'm going to bring it down even more. Okay, so let's go 0.6, so that's dropping off a bit. We're going to come down about here. Let's try that. I liked how that sounded. And the cool thing about automation is this track volume goes back up to where it was originally for this next lead part that comes in. So I'm going to hide the automation and let's check that volume to make sure that we like this one. I want that lead to kind of float on top because it's, melodic and pretty, but I don't want it to be like the lead singer of the song. I want it to be a part, but not the showcase. I like the volume on this verse section. So let's check the pre-chorus. There's something in there that I don't like. I think I need to massage the EQ of one of those leads a little bit. I don't know which one it is. Is it this? I think it's the second one. So when I get to like EQing the tracks, I'll massage that one a hair. Just there was something that was just a little like grating about it. It could be that my guitar, those two tracks are just a hair out of tune. That happens. It's a demo. So, okay, let's go to the chorus. Think they're a little loud right there. So let's come in and do the same thing. So we're going to put one there, so that we aren't adjusting the volume of anything before or after this clip, but just the clip. I'm going to use these little beat markers to So let's actually go back and check the level that we had previously that we liked, which was -6 and -1.9. So let's match that. There's -0.5. So let's check that. Okay, so I keep giving you a couple beats of that next bit. So I like that. Like I said, I want that harmonic movement to be in there. I want there to be a melody, but there's also going to be vocals over the top of this. And we're prone to doing vocal harmonies in layers. So that lead guitar part is not the focal point of this section. It's a nice embellishment, but it's just an embellishment. So I don't want it to like really stand out. So cool. So that's everything up through that first chorus. So I was talking a little bit about some of the other EZmix plugins I use, which is pretty much just one other one. On the bass, they have this cabinet. It's this Californian 1x15 bass cab. It's really warm, kind of punchy, and I like that. Sometimes I throw a Darkglass, the Neural DSP Darkglass, in front of it, but sometimes that's just a little too grindy. So we're just rolling with the bass DI into the EZmix. So if I solo the bass and I take off EZmix, get out of here, take off EZmix, and then if I put it on, big difference. So really like that plugin. The EZmix has a bunch of like guitar EQs you can throw on and stuff like that, but for the most part I kind of just use the stock settings within the Logic plugins. I'm a big preset mixer. Like I said, it's close, it's gonna sound fine. It's not for the record. No one's paying me to mix their record. They could if they wanted. One thing we're gonna do on the bass is I'm going to add a compressor. I'm going to use the stock Logic compressor, and I compress mine somewhere around 4:1. I don't add any makeup gain, and I do lower the threshold a bit typically. And then here's that with it off. Just tame it a little bit. It's not drastic. And then I like the way that that bass guitar sounds. So I'm not really going to EQ it probably at all. This so far sounds fine for me. You don't really realize how much bass is doing in a mix until you mute it. I love bass. Okay, so I am going to EQ the guitars a hair, and this is going to get me kicked out of the cool guy club, but that's okay. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add an EQ, and inside here there is this picked electric guitar, and I kind of like how this one sounds, and I don't really goof with it too much. So let's compare that. So if I have it on, so here's it with it off. Whoops. Here's it with it off. It doesn't sound awesome on its own, but it's not supposed to. It's a mix. So it's all about the combination of all the instruments together. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to copy this over to the other rhythm guitar because it's the same guitar playing the same part. So I EQ them the same. So let's listen to that. So here it is with the EQ on. Whoop, come on. Now let's listen to it with the EQ off. Little less low end, little more bite. Like I said, it doesn't sound awesome on its own, but I do like it. Then on the lead guitars, I usually use that same EQ, but then I tweak it. So sometimes I loop something when I'm working with it. Another thing is that if you're EQing something, you really shouldn't, so I'm told, so I've observed, you shouldn't EQ it soloed. You want to EQ it to how it's going to sound in the mix. Again, it's a mix. The mix is greater than the sum of its parts. So because it's the lead, I really am not going to need a lot of this low end because it's not playing the rhythm part. So what I did there was I just took off a little bit of that sizzly high end. Like, let me show you. So here's with it off. And it's not a ton, but it's noticeable to me. So let's see how that sits in the mix. It's noticeable to me, so I'm going to copy that over to the other lead guitar. So perfect example. Here's what it sounds like with no EQ. Oh, come on. Gives it some clarity, takes out some of that muddiness in that low end, takes a little bit of bite off that top. I think that's pretty excellent. I think that rocks. I'm going to let that sit for a second in my brain before I make any other adjustments to that lead guitar. The other thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to send both of these lead guitars to another bus. So I don't have any buses. Well, sorry, there's two buses that seem to come set up on every Logic project, which is a small chamber, which you can use to like send a snare to or whatever. And then there's the large chamber, which is like a big reverb that they've got on there. So that I can do one of two things, one of three things. I could individually apply a reverb to both of these channels. So I could put a reverb here and I could put a reverb here. And that's going to be more processor intensive. I could send it to this bus 3, which is the large chamber, which has its own delay and EQ and stuff to it. Or I could make my own bus and then pick my own reverb or delay or whatever it is. I could also just change this plugin. I don't typically. So let's send this to bus 3, which is the large hall. because I want my lead guitars to have some reverb, not necessarily delay, but a little wetness to them. I recorded that with a dry distortion track on my Fractal Axe 8. There wasn't any reverb or delay on it because I knew I wanted to add it in here. So with this knob here, I can control how much it sends. So let's start with 19. Let's see what that sounds like. So over here, you can see that this is just the audio from the lead guitars. Like if I solo this, you can also hear a very small amount of the drum, the drums. I don't think I did this. It might have done this automatically, but it routed a very small amount of the drum to that. So I'm going to play with the volume on this so you can hear what it does to the whole mix. So right now, like I said, I've got it at about negative 19. Or is it just 19? Yeah, negative 19. But let me crank the volume on this so you can hear how that affects the mix. I think somewhere around minus 14 was good. So the benefit of using a bus is you can send multiple tracks to a bus and apply processing to multiple tracks at one time with one plugin, or at least one track, without having to send plugins to multiple individual tracks. So it saves on processing. It lets you make big changes across multiple tracks with relative ease. So let's do that again. And so this reverb channel, this large chamber, isn't super loud, but let's see what happens when I mute it. I don't know if that comes across on the video, but you can hear those lead guitars dry up, and I like the wetness. I like reverb on my guitars. I typically have reverb on even my rhythm guitars, but it's hard to work with in a mix, so I typically just leave it for the live settings. So the bass is hitting just a little more for me than I want it to, so I'm going to bring that down a hair. Rhythm guitars, now that I EQ'd them a little bit, just a little loud, I'm gonna bring those down. My guitars are just a little out of tune there. So let me, where did I first have, oh, it was right there. So it's, the volume there is fine. I think it's a little loud again over this pre-chorus section. So let's bring those down. So I'm going to zoom way in. Boom, boom, boom. And then we'll come over here, boom, 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 boom. And let's drop this. So I think we ended up somewhere around like, somewhere around there. So let's check that. So you'll notice this volume is going to whoop as soon as we cross that bar. And I could use the automation to adjust the pan or really pretty much any parameter, turn on and off plugins. But I just think it's the volume, like how loud these little bits are, that I don't like. So let's go down just a hair more. It's specifically the way this lead part sits over this pre-chorus. And so the cool thing about that is, like I pointed out earlier, these are going to go back to where they were. So I didn't adjust the volume for anything else anywhere on the track. There was like I heard a slide or something that I didn't like. I don't know if you can hear it on the video, but I hear it go. Whoa. I kind of like it, so I'm going to leave it. So let's do that chorus, or the pre-chorus. See, I think this is a hair loud now that I have gone through and EQ'd it. So let's bring these down to compensate. Cool. So like, that's kind of it. The next step would be to bounce it and check it. So I'm going to save the, I almost said save the game again. So I'm going to save the project. Let's bounce it. So I am going to bounce, we don't want MP3, we want it to be a wave file. And I'm going to stop it at the bar where that chorus ends so that you guys don't hear it. So that's 2 minutes, 47 megabytes. Good for me. So we'll save this. The way that the tracks print when they're bouncing, so like what you're hearing in your DAW is not what's going to be printed, pushed down into that wave track. It's going to sound different. So you always want to check. So I might bounce a song 4 or 5 times before I've got that mix master where I want it. It's never, like almost never right the first time. So like I'm going to bounce this, and I'm betting that the bass is going to be too loud. Bass is always the thing that sticks out for me. It's like the bass is going to be too loud and the lead guitars are going to be too loud. But that's done, so let's check it. Cool. So the only thing out of there that I want to adjust, and that I grabbed I have like a desk buddy, like a whiteboard here that I can write shit on, is that the lead guitars in the intro are too loud. So let's come over here. Boop. and let's adjust them. Let's try it again. So I want a wave. I'm going to stop it at 67 again. And I don't want to lose that other one, so I'm going to call it short version 2. We're going to bounce, hydrate. So let's check this second one. So here's the first one. Here's the second one. And because I adjusted the automation, not the track volume, nothing else down the line was affected. That's the beauty of automation. So that's it. That's as much of a mix as I'm going to show you. So really, like I said, I kind of let the mix mastering chain over here do the heavy lifting. I don't do a ton to the individual tracks. Like this guitar track has an EQ. This guitar track has an EQ. An EQ, it's being sent to a reverb. This bass is being compressed with a cab sim, and I didn't do anything to the drums outside of the Kontakt plugin. Inside Kontakt, I turn up the volume. We put it on the high CPU mode, which activates this thing called turbo, which is like internal compression and processing that Get Good Drums is doing for me. So yeah, I turned up the reverb on the snare and the toms and adjusted some volume on the cymbals, but other than that, it's all happening within Kontakt, with the exception of the little bit of reverb it's being sent to. But the mastering chain here is doing almost all of the work. Let's check the limiter. One thing I would normally do here is I'd probably add some gain to this because it got quieter through all of this processing. It's like the last thing in the chain is this EZmix. And it's pretty bumping. Not really much to adjust. So if I wanted to, I could come through and add some extra gain on the limiter, but it feels good. So I don't know that I need to. That's kind of how I do it from start to finish. This has been recording for a long ass time, so I don't know how long this video will end up being, but hopefully you learned something. I think it sounds good, and it 1000% gets the idea across to my bandmate, who can then go through and add his vocals and his extra layered harmonies and stuff like that, and it'll come out sounding really cool. But like I said, this is a building block, just something to send him to get the idea across. If I wanted to, we could send this to our label and be like, hey, look, we're working on new stuff. It'll sound roughly like this. The end mix, when we actually go through and re-record it and add the drums and do all the extra stuff, won't sound a ton off of this, but it'll have reamped guitars, it'll have acoustic drums, it'll have all the vocals, and it'll have like the choirs and the organ if I put it in there and all the other stuff to zhuzh it up and make it a full By Fire and Sword song. But as far as like this is a song structure, this is kind of the melodic shape of things, this is perfect. It sounds really good. I'm going to show this to several people. So I hope this was informative, or at least entertaining for you to watch how this happens. So I don't have a big mixing console at my desk. I just do everything within Logic and my audio interface, but nothing in my interface is happening here because I don't really use universal audio plugins because I'm not rich. I love the interface, but I don't have $100 per plugin for compressors and shit. I love doing this. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos. So if this is at all interesting to you, give me a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you're feeling froggy. But I'm going to keep doing this because I'm having fun doing it. I like getting my music out there to people who don't know about it. I like producing. I like writing. So I appreciate you watching the video. We'll see you next time.